Hey there, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, Wednesday, one day before Thanksgiving for the folks in the States. Big, big stuff to cover today. I think what we've been hearing from a lot of people is that, AI is useful, but the question is how do they use it? So who we have today, we've got Josh Farruggio, our head of wealth management sales, who has, deep history in covering asset managers and sort of how they can use AI tools or other wealth tech. And we've got George Hinin, who is our solutions consultant, who's been working with our clients on a daily basis, trying to implement and activate AI specifically and find ways that it's helpful for them. So really want to thank both of you for joining and hosting this one. So no further ado, I'll give it over to Josh to get us started.
Thanks, Fraser. Just gonna share my screen here. Perfect. So, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Really want to thank you for taking the time to join us, especially during a busy Thanksgiving weekend, like Fraser mentioned. George and I we're going to be walking you through the transformative role of AI in investment management and how it's making a significant impact in the industry already. The focus is really going to be around understanding how AI can elevate productivity and decision making for professionals, whether it's portfolio managers or analysts. And we're really going to blend together conceptual insights with real world applications. And then we'll cap it off with George doing a demonstration of Alpha, our AI powered product. So, to guide our discussion, we'll begin by defining AI and exploring why it's critical in modern finance. Next, we'll outline really what makes an AI solution effective, specifically for investment management. Um, and then afterward, I'll walk you through a day in the life of an investment professional and how AI is really reshaping their workflow. And then following that, we'll have George, the alpha expert, showcase a live demo. And finally, we'll wrap it up with a Q&A session where you can ask any questions, whether it's on today's topics or even broader use cases with AI in finance. So with that, pretty excited. I think we always want to start these webinars with, what is AI in particular? Maybe some of you on the call are quite newer to the concept, but artificial intelligence obviously can seem pretty complex, but at its core, it's really about using algorithms to process large volumes of data and predict outcomes. So this can be the programmed AI many are already familiar with, but I think of it as really just the simulation of human intelligence that are processed by these machines. So it's actually been around us for a lot of years. If you think of something simple like an email, right? How is it distinguishing junk between quality? Autopilot in aviation, virtual assistants like Siri. But then we take it one step further, right? Looking at generative AI, it can actually learn patterns from these vast amounts of data and use them to produce original content that resembles, some of the examples that you were using or feeding the machine to train on. So anything from creating reports, drafting client-ready summaries, or even assisting in, let's say, brainstorming investment strategies, all of that done with a prompt, which is pretty cool. But finally, when we look at, the third step and where we see the most advanced level, this is agentic AI. It not only processes the data, but it also acts on your behalf. It thinks like you, it's doing stuff for you. Things like automating tasks like portfolio rebalancing or even sending proactive alerts about market shifts. So really, really cool stuff. But we think that this is obviously revolutionizing how we work. It enables professionals to process information faster, act more decisively, and really stay ahead of trends, all of which are critical in, a very fast-moving environment. So AI is obviously changing the world. That's, undoubtedly a fact, but it brings significant advantages. We see leading financial institutions leveraging how to revolutionize investment strategies, streamline operations, all to gain a competitive advantage. Anything from asset management to financial advising, it's really the future of finance. And it's very topical. The other day I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal. Morgan Stanley, which they oversee 6 trillion in assets, they were facing scrutiny on their anti money laundering controls, right? So in response to this, they actually invested in proper vetting processes and technology, but specifically AI solutions to enhance client risk management and compliance. JP Morgan as well. They internally launched this LLM suite that they call almost acting as an AI assistant to really produce or boost productivity for their employees. And whether it's tasks like drafting emails or integrating other things into their daily workflows, they find the value in it. And it's just a few examples that you see on the screen here, but all of it underscores really the growing role AI has in wealth, asset management, all areas of finance to help these firms really increase operational efficiency and client service. So the big question, um, you know, for investment managers today isn't when to adopt AI. I think that was more of a November 2022 or maybe a early January 23 conversation, but now it's more on how effectively and what should you look for in an AI solution. And really, we've broken it down into three pillars here. The first one being finance specific. I think AI needs to understand the nuances of finance. This can include point-in-time data to ensure accuracy, integrating with your proprietary data sets, and really offering higher precision in those outputs. It needs to train to think the way you think, like an analyst, like a portfolio manager. To give you an example, if you wanted to be able to understand the impact of interest rates on banks versus real estate or utilities. Right? A broad-based large language model lacks the detailed understanding of really what's required to, analyze sector-specific investment strategies. The second thing would be a trustworthy AI solution that offers transparency. We always like to say this term, it's a glass box approach rather than a black box, meaning that it really processes or it processes auditable and the recommendations are all traceable to verified sources. The second point that I'll make there on the trusted piece is SOC 2 certification. That's crucial, right? Being able to demonstrate that the solution adheres to cybersecurity standards. And then the final piece is being proactive. Think of this as behaving like a eager junior hire who not only brings you the latest updates, but also flags critical changes before they even become issues. So imagine being alerted on potential risks in your portfolio without even asking. And when we look back on these three pillars, it really ensures that AI is actionable, it's safe, and it's tailored to your needs. So helping you work smarter, not harder at the end of the day. So we kind of mapped out a day in the life of an analyst. And I want you guys to imagine this workflow without AI, right? We're all skilled professionals, very efficient, often constrained by really repetitive manual tasks. That's really the point here. So I'll walk you through the day. Typically in the morning, you'll come in at 7 a.m., maybe earlier for some of you and reviewing overnight news, market updates. This involves combing through emails, market reports, news platforms. It's very time intensive, and you're manually filtering what's important and what can be ignored, right? So, for instance, if there's a global economic event overnight, and an analyst must piece together its impact on various sectors and the portfolio itself, they're often doing so with incomplete data, if you really think of it. And by the time that they finish this analysis, they've already spent hours trying to understand the context of the day ahead. So that's already, the early part of your morning. Mid-morning, as we transition to 9 o'clock onward, maybe you're diving deeper into some companies, sectors that are relevant to your portfolio. This can include, reading through some financial statements, analyst reports, industry news to really prepare for meetings or presentations. And, as an example, if you're preparing for a meeting with the CEO, they might need to review, or any analyst really would need to review, let's say 10 plus earnings reports to spot certain patterns. And this can take hours. I think research is critical, but the manual effort obviously limits you to how many topics you can actually cover comprehensively. As we transition to the bulk hours of the trading day, the focus shifts to monitoring positions, right? So looking at what's required to track market movements, ensure that the portfolio remains aligned with the strategy. Here you're relying on spreadsheets, dashboards, third-party tools that, don't proactively flag risks or opportunities. They're essentially reacting to what's happening, right? And it's easy to miss these subtle changes. It can go from um, what can impact your portfolio, but then also being able to manage multiple positions or clients, right? And then the end of the day, after the market closes, the shifts it shifts towards logging those daily activities, summarizing your thoughts, preparing for the next day. It could be anything from writing reports, formatting charts, emailing updates. These tasks are really repetitive, right? So by the time that you finish all of these tasks, you spent a significant portion of your day on non-strategic work. And I think that's a major problem, right? Without AI, much of the day is consumed by these tasks. You really don't have time for the strategic thinking or the problem solving or even identifying new opportunities that you really need to focus on. So we want to imagine how that day would actually look like with the power of AI. And the goal isn't just to automate these tasks. It's really to empower analysts to focus on what really matters most. How can you make an informed decision and drive results, right? So the same concept, 7 a.m., the analyst comes into the office, they go to their desk, and their AI assistant has already summarized the overnight news and market updates. Instead of manually sorting through, let's say, a ton of headlines, they're presented with a concise overview tailored to their portfolio. A very good example would be, let's say, a key supplier in a portfolio company that you have had a factory shut down overnight. The AI highlights this as a potential risk, providing, let's say, any general context or related news articles, and really just here to save you time, right? Saving hours in the morning, immediately focusing on what's high priority for you for the day ahead. As we transition to again, that 9 to 11 sweet spot where you're looking to make some preparation, we can really accelerate research by providing data-driven insights in literally minutes. Instead of manually reading through earnings reports, we can flag critical trends like declining profit margins or unusual revenue patterns. And that's something that Alpha can do, right? We can analyze company financials across multiple quarters. Um, Generate management level questions based on, let's say, performance shifts. And the way I kind of see the benefit here is preparing you to become faster, right? Being able to lock in on those opportunities and deepen, your analysis with certain topics. And then as we get to the bulk hour of the trading day, we can proactively set alerts on our portfolio if there's any changes. Let's say a company's stock price moves outside of a preset threshold, we can flag that. We can provide context on top of that. We can actually help maintain a watch list of companies or sectors, offering real-time updates on changes in valuation, sentiment, ESG scores. It's really just staying informed in real time without really needing to manually track these multiple data sources that you have. And then finally, as we get to the end of the day, reporting becomes seamless, right? You can really summarize all the activities, all the key decisions, market movements, upcoming risks, anything from formatting a report with charts and tables that are client ready, no manual work required. I think this is pretty powerful and frees up time again for strategic planning, perhaps networking, leaving the office early, which is kind of fun. Um, but just to really put it all into perspective here, imagine this cumulative effect, right, of these efficiencies, more informed decisions, faster turnaround times, and the greater ability to seize these market opportunities. That's truly the power of AI. So let's dive into Alpha. This is our AI-powered platform which brings these enhancements to life. We can really address key pain points in investment workflows through some pretty targeted solutions, and you'll see six that we've outlined here. And I'll pass it over to George in a minute just to kind of go through a live demo and some of the examples. But anything from, let's say, earnings call prep, we can aggregate the historical earnings call data, highlight trends, suggest follow-up questions for management, saving you hours of time. Anything related to macro trends, patterns that might be easy to miss. Perhaps on an ESG basis, it could be evaluating metrics or getting a clear picture of a company's ESG performance. On the thematic side, exploring AI adoption. Maybe you want to look for companies or specific industries that are going to benefit from this, or perhaps the rise in green energy. And then, due diligence in particular, right? Being able to look for acquisitions or investments. We can expedite due diligence by really looking at all relevant company information, anything from financials to management performance. So, without further ado, I'll pass it over to George, again, the in-house alpha expert, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Okay, so I'll jump into Alpha. We'll do a quick demonstration of what you can do on the platform. But before I do that, maybe just generally, the ways we see clients use the system most regularly fall into one of three buckets. It's either you have something that is a lot of manual work in your process that you're trying to automate out. We call that automating drudgery. The second is you have something in your process that you want to consistently monitor. And so we have the ability for you to monitor that part of your process or easily update it. And then the third is what we call superpowers, or where you can do something that you historically have never been able to do before, but is going to be a value add to your investment process. So the way I'll go through a set of these use cases and how you generally should think of AI is we'll start with the simpler use cases, and as we go further, we'll start looking at those superpowers. Typically, I think like any AI platform, or whenever you think of AI as a whole, the people who are on the leading edge or the forefront of AI are the ones that like develop their use cases as they are implementing the software. Whether that be alpha or that be any type of AI, the sooner you get into it, the sooner you'll be able to develop those use cases for yourself and find where those opportunities are. In terms of alpha specifically, what you're seeing on my screen is every single one of these boxes is an analyst that I have running for myself and is creating updates for me. So in this case, this one's monitoring one of my portfolios. It's letting me know whenever there's news or whenever there's an update for one of the names that I'm holding. This one's creating an investment thesis for Tesla. This one's breaking down where is Microsoft's revenue coming from? Is there anything that is degrading one of those areas of revenue? This one's monitoring every single earnings call within the Russell 1000 and trying to let me know, has any company mentioned NVIDIA or a partnership or Blackwell GPUs or so on. But the ability to go through all of that text is what we would define as a superpower, where you historically wouldn't have been able to do something like that. Just jumping into what I would say is like the first step, which is automating drudgery. This one is one that goes through Apple. We've specifically asked it to create a set of risks for Apple. What are some like high-level catalysts for Apple? And then for each of these, what are some like first and second derivative questions I would want to ask if I was meeting with the management team of Apple? And so this allows you, especially if you're going to a conference or if you're going to a meeting, it allows you to prepare for that conference really quickly. And that's something that we've had a lot of clients using us for. Before I jump into other use cases, I want to quickly highlight how this is different from a lot of the AI that you've seen, but also things you should consider when you're approaching AI solutions for your process. So whenever you ask a question to our system, it will produce a work log. And one really helpful thing with the work log is it allows you to audit every single step of the process that it's taking in order to produce the output that you've asked for. So in this case, you can see that it found the ticker for Apple. And then from there, pulled out to the last 4 earnings calls over the last year, and then found the SEC filings, and then went and pulled out over 2,000 articles for Apple across the last year. So the first thing is you want to look for AI solutions that are auditable, where you can easily explain how it received its output. The second that we think is really important in terms of driving financial analysis is the ability to scale your analysis. So for some context, if you were to go into ChatGPT and ask a question like, what is the weather today? It'll go out, it'll read 30 articles, and using those 30 articles, it'll respond to you saying the weather today is XYZ. But where that doesn't work as well for financial analysis is if you go to ChatGPT and say, read all of the information for Apple or read all the earnings calls across the S&P 500 and find patterns within this sector or industry or this area, it's not going to do that well because it's still only going to go out and read 30 articles. So in this case, where it went out and read SEC filings, 2,000 articles for Apple, if you had done a similar question on another interface, you would have been limited to the exact same amount of analysis that it uses for any type of question. And then the third is that we're directly connected to financial data. So whenever you want to use something in the finance world, ideally you want it to be trained on financial data and leveraging that financial data for any type of analysis that it does. One thing that we think sets us apart beyond all of this is the ability to then produce a monitoring use case. So although this looks like a set of steps that it's taken, it's actually produced this in a repeatable way where I can then go out every single day and I can see the cadence at which it will run. So in this case, this agent is running for me daily at 8 a.m. But if I wanted it to run in a different time period, let's say, I could put in every 12 hours. And now every 12 hours, this is going to run for me. It's going to let me know, has something changed? And so you can see on November 22nd, it sent a notification. It would have also sent me an email notification saying, hey, something has changed, but it says Apple is seeking to dismiss the DOJ antitrust lawsuit. So for any agent or any analyst you produce, it's going to run every single day. It'll notify you when something changes. It's connected to financial data, and you can audit how it's reaching its conclusions. A couple of cool use cases beyond management questions that people will leverage our platform for. One is investment thesis creation. And so in this case, you can see the question I used to ask this is very small, but it's ultimately driven based off of our financial understanding and the clients we've worked with. So in this case, it goes out. We've asked about CRC, and it immediately creates an investment thesis or a due diligence document where it'll go out and say, okay, for CRC, this is their core operations and leadership, technological strengths, what are some major drivers of growth, revenue growth and profitability, strategic vision and leadership, key catalysts. And then, so this is all of the positives about the company. Now they'll do the opposite for the second half where, okay, where are all of their operations and industry challenges, technological risk, growth limitations and risks, financial concerns, leadership risks, and then is there any positive or negative news developments over the last recent period? So whenever you produce one of these, this is now running daily. It'll notify you if something's changing across CRC, and it was a very simple question to ask the system in order to produce that type of output. A third one is where we get really interesting, where we start combining qualitative data with quantitative data. So in this case, we've asked the question about Walmart. Find all of the peers for Walmart, and we're trying to prepare for an earnings call. It goes out, it finds all of the competitors to Walmart within the S&P 500, and then it goes and says, it starts pulling from our structured data that we're connected to. So we have data coming in from Refinitiv, S&P Cap IQ, ORATs, short interest data, and so on. But across all of these, we've specifically told it to pull in these 4 pieces of data: close price, target price, mean, high, and low. And then across all of those, we then have it going in through each of the retail grocery stores, pulling out what are the major positive and negative developments over the last 3 months. And you can get it to continue building. So this will start to go into what are similarities across those companies, what are some reasons that they hit expectations or not, what are some like risk factors they're mentioning in their 10Qs. But ultimately, the way we view the system is it's not something that is going to do individual Q&A, The goal is we're trying to automate workflows, and what our users use us for is ways that they can take large parts of their process or ways they think about the world, bring it into the system, and then start trying to automate that process out for them on a daily basis, and it'll let you know whenever something is changing across the way you view the world. A couple more that I think are quite interesting. This is more from a macro level view, but this goes out, it reads NVIDIA's earnings call, and then we've told it to categorize what are some like high level first derivative impacts. Then we go out and say, okay, what are some like second derivative impacts for the call that NVIDIA recently had? And then we have a third version, and this is where we're starting to try and get really detailed. But what are some third derivative impacts on other industries and markets from what NVIDIA reported in their earnings calls? And so in this case, it says like telecom infrastructure upgrades driven by AI demand. And it'll give you a general reason here. But if you're curious, then we then took those 5 impacts and we found every company that stands to benefit from those impacts. So it's read every single earnings call, every single piece of text across the 1,000 companies in the Russell 1000, and then using that, it's then gone and said, okay, these are the companies that we think stand to benefit from telecom infrastructure upgrades driven by AI demand, and this is exactly why. And whenever you see a fact on any one of these agents, it'll link you to the exact citation from where that data is coming from. You can click into the citation, you can see the news, whether it be coming from news, SEC filings, or earnings calls. You'll be able to see exactly where that data is coming from and what's producing the fact that you're seeing on the system overall. I'll run through a couple more really quickly, and then from there, I'll open it up to any questions. This is another exciting one where if you work on like the investment banking side, these are all companies that are mentioning spin-offs, M&A, or inorganic growth in some way, shape, or form. And not only does it just stick to identifying companies that on their last earnings call talked about one of these categories, but it's also going out and saying, okay, what are the companies that have irregularly high cash reserves based off of their 10Qs over the last 3 years? So what are the companies that maybe have some capital to take on an acquisition or could be an interesting target for maybe one of the companies that we're interested in? So ultimately, the way to think about this is you're only limited by the data. And in terms of the data that we have data coming from earnings, SEC filings, and from news, as well as something like 7,000 time series data sets. There's a lot of versions of how we can use this and how we can structure this, depending on the user. But what I'd say is like whenever you approach any AI solution, alpha or others, is you want to make sure that they can scale up their analysis. This is not something you can do with simply looking at like 30 articles at once. And you want to be able to know that it's connected directly to financial data, trained on financial data, and that whenever it produces a piece of its analysis, it's being validated and verified, and it's coming from a trusted source. With that, I'll open it up to any questions, and we can talk through more use cases depending on the questions that are being asked.
Well, thanks guys for that walkthrough. I think it's really, really compelling stuff. I think that all of us, depending on the sort of field we're in, I work in marketing, can find different ways to incorporate AI, but it's not easy. It's not necessarily the first thing that you think of, especially when a lot of us are kind of like stuck in the stuff that we've always done in one way. It's really interesting to kind of look to the future and see what's available. Certainly, I think from the walkthrough that we saw, we're finding a lot of different ways that people are able to use AI to kind of make their day a little bit easier. Whatever that may be to you is dependent on what you view as exciting. But I think it's freeing up your time to do the stuff that you find more interesting about your job, which I think is a really exciting kind of new avenue. So just to kind of reiterate some of the stuff that George and Josh talked about, AI is finance specific, or we want to be finding AI that's finance specific. We want to be making sure that it's trusted. So, George kind of highlighted those citations. We want to make sure that it's kind of seeing this work log, seeing what it's doing. So you are ultimately the decider of what is and isn't important, and then also making sure that it's proactive. It's going out there and it's giving you the updates. It's delivering stuff to you, not the other way around, where you're having to go ask a bunch of questions. So thanks again, guys. I'll walk through a few questions. We will keep it a little bit brief today because it's already 12:30. But sort of, this is kind of always the first sort of question that most people have is just around use cases. So what somebody here is asking is that they're interested in learning more about the sort of individual and functional use cases that people are successfully using live and what the ROI is. So I think what they're asking is just kind of like, how are people using these on a day-to-day basis, and what is sort of the return that they're seeing in terms of success?
Yeah, I can take that. So I guess some context on what we do is we're part of the solutions consulting team over here at Boosted. And so whenever we're engaged on a project, we do two things in parallel. One, where we build agents for clients that are high value add, and we're trying to measure how useful those are to the client. And then separately, we're also teaching clients how to like leverage the system and build their own workflows that they would want to automate. So in terms of where we've seen the ROI, I think high level, it's a lot in terms of saving people time or trying to identify ideas or areas that they might have missed. A cool example of that is imagine you're trying to identify macro thematic risks. A cool version that we've done this across is picture you could take every earnings call across an industry, a sector, or a subsector, and then read every single earnings call, pull up what are the questions analysts are asking, and like what are the core areas of concerns. Is this something that you've considered for the companies that you hold? Is this something that you've considered for the companies that you're monitoring? And so on one hand, it's trying to produce insights that lead to greater performance. The second is trying to save time. And generally, we found we can save within 20 to 30% of a user's time in terms of the tasks that they currently do.
Right. That's I would certainly love to save 20 to 30% of my day. Well, very exciting stuff. I think the other thing that's kind of cool about AI is that it's like these are early days, and so I think these numbers are just going to keep growing. You're going to find more and more use cases and more ways to keep saving time. This next question is just kind of asking about earnings summaries and being able to send earnings summaries to their clients from earnings transcripts and using AI. So I think broadly kind of commentary and also just kind of covering a little bit about what folks can do during earnings season.
Yep,
Yeah.
I can.
Oh,
Go ahead,
we'll give it
George.
to Josh.
Okay, Josh, how are you?
I mean, I'll do like a little intro on it. You can get into more detail, but
Sure, sounds good.
basically, Alpha can ingest and summarize really any earnings transcript, so we can extract key financial metrics, understand sentiment, certain trends, and then provide pretty concise and timely updates to keep you informed. So I don't know if there's particular examples that you want to share, George, around that, but that's in a
Yeah,
nutshell what we can do.
I can share my screen. I think there's a cool version of similar to what someone's asking here. This one ran through an ETF of names, and then for each company, it's then pulled out a summary of its earnings calls. What are the top three positive, top three negative developments? What's cool is if you're curious to share this with someone, whenever you're leveraging the system, there's a share analyst report. This won't update on a daily basis for whoever you share it with. They'll send them a static view of what you're seeing right now. So if they were curious to see what are the top 30 or the earnings summaries across all of these companies, you could generate this link, and let's assume I'm not logged in. I can then open this up and it'll produce a view like this. So regardless of whether or not they're the ones who ran the analyst or not, they can see a fixed view of the output that it's producing and see each of the earnings call summaries if that's something you want to share across as well.
Cool. I think there's a lot of use cases around folks using commentary to sort of empower themselves to do more, be able to personalize at scale, and be sending more sort of things out to their clients as needed. So this next question is kind of uh, broad, but I'd like to ask it because I think it sort of goes into sort of setting context and understanding expectations around what some AI tools are selling and what some AI tools are not selling. So this person is asking about what's your track record versus an equity market index or other benchmarks. And I'll leave it to you to decide who wants to answer first.
Sure, I guess I could
Go ahead, Josh.
as
Thanks.
as a decision support tool, really just to surface these insights. Um, Not really operating as like an autonomous portfolio manager. I think the main thing is that clients remain in control of the strategy implementation, right? Being able to put your machine into the brain and have it think like you, work for you, rather than replacing. So I would say that's the biggest distinguishment. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, George, in specific context, but that's in a nutshell what we how we kind of see ourselves.
No, I agree. And I think it's ultimately like where you want to combine quantitative with qualitative data and use a massive amount of unstructured text and start using it either in a structured way or summarizing that information for insights is ultimately what we do really, really well. And that's really what we're focusing on with the clients that we work with.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's just kind of important for folks to sort of understand what it is that they're looking to do themselves, right? Because for some people, they may be looking to have something like Josh had mentioned, some sort of autonomous thing. But for what we're sort of offering, and I know where George is seeing success with his clients, it's more in line with helping people do more with what they have, and so sort of augmenting their existing processes and allowing people to do more with less. The next two questions are kind of the same, so I'll just kind of launch into this first one, but it's about kind of Gen AI being able to interpret data to George, you had mentioned this already, but like quantitative and qualitative, and then generating assessment on that data.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can tackle it, but generally, yes, like any type of qualitative and quantitative data, I think something that separates us and you probably can't do with existing LLMs or at least non-financial based LLMs is that they don't have a direct connection to financial data, so it won't be up to date, or it won't be able to pull in all of the data that you want. Where you can combine quantitative data because we have a structured data set. Historically, Boosted started off as like a system that was very quant. It was building models that like recommend buy, holds, and sells, and have since transitioned to like this world of providing research and supporting fundamental investors. I think that because we've created that data set and the structured data behind all of this, you can now pull out that quantitative data. You can pull out the unstructured data in text, combine them together, and then you can get really cool insights using that. And to me, that's similar to the world where we were looking at the inorganic growth combined with like what are the companies that have high cash reserves? Or if you were curious to see like what are the companies that have high cash reserves, a certain short interest rate, and then maybe companies that have a revenue growth rate of X, Y, Z, and so on. You can start combining all of this stuff together and then really producing an interesting list of names that you're interested in.
I'm gonna do one last question here, and this is one of the live ones. But we've got a person asking kind of about if you can run these sort of things on custom portfolios and their own models, which I think is sort of a question that people are definitely curious about, especially as it relates to how do I use this myself, right? It's very interesting to talk about, hey, we've got this basket, but like, who cares when it's not the names that you cover? So I think this sounds like a good one for George to answer if you can take
Yeah,
that one.
I have a good example of it as well.
Correct.
I So these are a lot of questions that our clients asks, which helps us kind of have these examples just off of the get-go. But in this case, this goes through the RD ETF, and it could be a custom portfolio, it could be a custom watch list, or so on. But it pulls out the names within the ETF, and then for each of them, it pulls out performance over the last period, what are the top 5, bottom 5 performers, and then based off of weighted return, what are the top 5, bottom 5. And then for each of the names, it then goes through and tries to pull out any information over that period as to what is explaining reasons for that performance for each of those companies. And so it'll go out and do this for any company that you're interested in. But the idea being here that you can run this across any type of portfolio, any type of watch list of names, or if you have a really large custom universe that you think doesn't really fall under a general ETF, we upload those into the system and then they are directly used within the system in terms of being referenced, and you can drive all of your analysis off of those names.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks for covering that, George. And thanks both Josh and George for hosting this one. And thanks to everybody for joining. Really appreciate everybody's participation here. There's a lot to be done with AI, and we're only kind of scratching the surface. So, if anybody wants to hear more about what's happening, please reach out to us. And we really appreciate everybody's time here. So with that, I will give you all your afternoon back. So thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.